Hey everybody, I'm Mark Walters of BigFanboy.com here once again at the Dallas International Film Festival, and it is my great honor to be talking with the one and only Richard Shepard. Dom Hemingway is the new movie, and from the second I saw the first poster, I was like, okay, I'm immediately on board, I'm intrigued, and then when I saw the first trailer, I was like, I'm definitely intrigued, and knowing that you were involved, because I love your films. I'm a huge fan of The Matador, I'm a huge fan of The Hunting Party. So I guess let's just kind of start at the beginning and talk about, like, how did this one come about? What was the impetus of the storyline? I mean, you also write your films as well as direct them.
I do write and direct.
Yeah.
I wanted to write a crime movie in which there's no crime. I wanted to feel like a crime movie, be as fun as a crime movie, but be much more about character. So I thought it'd be interesting to take a character, perhaps it would be number 4 or 5 in a group, in a normal movie, and make him the star and sort of follow him through his ups and downs. And he's a wild, profane, kind of a crazy man, but he's got a beating heart as well. And it was a sort of fun journey with him. I enjoyed my time with Dom, and I hope people do too,
Yeah, I think it's really fun. And it also kind of, when did the concept of setting this in and about London come about? Was that always part of the
Well, yeah.
idea?
I mean, there's like a great tradition of British crime movies that, like Sexy Beast or
Long Good Friday.
Long Good Friday, Mona Lisa, The Hit. All of the ones I love are character driven. They're not really about the crime. They're about the characters. And so I was sort of inspired by those movies. So when I started writing, it was immediately set in England. And we ended up shooting it in London and in the south of France, which was really fun. And
I'm assuming all the stuff at the big crime lord house, that's all in France.
That was all in France. We basically took over a chateau.
Yeah.
But it was, I'd only been to London for 4 days before I started writing this movie. So I sort of went out of my way to not write Dom with like a Cockney rhyming slang or anything like that, because I figured I'd never be authentic that way. I just wrote him with his own sort of verbal poetry that is very much his. And then when Jude took over, basically played the part, because he had a South London accent, he sort of ground it all, and it sounds really authentic, even though I'm, had not spent a lot of time there.
Absolutely. And then where did the inspiration come to bring in Richard Grant? He's terrific. He's so good.
He's such a good actor. Well, With Nail and I is one of my most favorite movies ever.
Yeah.
And I had been a huge fan of his, but he sort of disappeared from. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and I wrote the part for him without knowing him. I named him Dickie for Richard E. Grant. Like, I just was like, God, I'd like to see him play this role. It would be really funny. He's such an odd, Costello to Dom's Abbott. I mean, there's just sort of like they're an odd combination, and. I wrote it for him, and we sent it to him, and he said yes, and it was like one of those great kismet things. And Richard E. Grant is like a professional scene stealer, so he's a perfect person to go opposite Jude, because Jude obviously is eating the scenery through a lot of the movie, and Richard E. Grant is sort of our eyes and ears in a way.
Right. One of the things I love about your films is you seem to have this tendency, and I don't even know if this is intentional or not, but you take these great seasoned actors that we know, and you give them a showcase performance that maybe other people are not giving them that chance to have. Like in The Matador with Pierce Brosnan, I still think that's one of his best, if not his best role ever. And then you look at like Richard Gere in The Hunting Party, same sort of thing. It reminds us how great he can be. With Jude Law, I think a lot of people, they know him, they're familiar with him, but they don't really get a chance to see just how great he can be, and this film is such a showcase piece for him.
Yeah, he's spectacular in the movie, and I was so lucky to get him. But I like taking actors who you sort of feel like you almost can, oh yeah, he's good, I know his work, and then you sort of almost marginalize them just because of that, and then give them a role that completely shifts the landscape. It's like, I think one of the surprises of Dom Hemingway is that Jude plays this larger-than-life character who's tough and violent, things you wouldn't necessarily associate with Jude.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the fun for the audience. And for me as a filmmaker making independent films, I don't ever have any money to offer the actor to sort of big payday parts. So what do you have to offer them? Usually what you have that can intrigue them is something different for them, something that they haven't done before, a place to show a different side of themselves. And I think in the case of Pierce with The Matador, he definitely saw this part as like coming at the right time in his career. He sort of wanted to give a big F you to James Bond and the whole thing. And then with Jude, I think he was just, he'd been playing Dr. Watson for a while, and I think he wanted to be, the lead, and I think he wanted to show people that there was more to him than you might imagine. And he gives sort of a big, funny, profane performance in this movie, and I think, I think the reason that Jude connected with it so much was that he believed the guy, he grounded the guy, and he knew he was going to have fun as Dom, and he did. He had a lot of fun.
There's also an interesting thing that happens in the film. You have a great visual style, but like I'd say like the first half or so of the film is really frenetic and just kind of zany, and then you hit this point where everything kind of slows down a bit. And to me, that was very evocative of the character kind of like, okay, it's time to get serious now and time to sort of reevaluate my life and see where things are
I
at.
wanted the visuals to match Dom on every level,
Yeah.
because in Dom's mind, he's starring in a $150 million Michael Bay movie, And since I couldn't blow shit up, I just wanted to give a visual punch to it. He's a guy who lives life to the fullest and eats everything and drinks everything and sleeps with everyone and gets in as much trouble as a human being can do. So I wanted big, bold colors and a big color palette to make it fun for the audience as well. But it's also sort of Dom's energy. And at a certain point, Dom loses everything. He loses his money. He realizes his daughter hates him. He shot himself in the foot so many times. And the movie does shift in tone. But I think ultimately, since you hopefully care about Dom, you find yourself rooting for him despite your maybe better nature. It's just like there's something about him that's lovable. And I wanted, as much as it was big, I always wanted it to be grounded. And, we did shoot in real places, and the places we shot in London on the streets there are real. And yes, there's color and vibrancy, but this is about a man who has this huge projection of himself, this ego, this walking id, but is really wounded and sort of pathetic. And so I wanted to mix those two tones, and I think it works. And I'm more interested in movies that sort of surprise me by doing things I hadn't really expected than most movies or most crime movies. You kind of know what's going to happen. And this one, it's not quite like that, and that was sort of the point.
Yeah. And when you're shooting in London, when you're shooting a movie with guys like Jude Law and Richard Grant, does that make it even harder because they know those guys so well over there? And I would think that the kind of the fans wanting to figure out what was going on would make it a little more logistically difficult.
Well, it was funny because Richard E. Grant is a much bigger star in London than Jude Law. I mean, he's revered.
Yeah.
With Nail and I is like everyone's favorite movie there. So we would be on the street and Jude would be like, why doesn't anyone want my autograph? But we had fun. We rehearsed the whole movie ahead of time. And in fact, at certain points, Jude and the other actors, we would go onto the street where we would be shooting weeks later, and Jude would have a hoodie on or whatever, and we would just rehearse. So the whole movie was rehearsed ahead of time. So I got a lot of looks on the street when people were like, is that Jude Law? What's he doing on the middle of the street, like rehearsing? But we did a lot of that, and I think it helped the movie because we shot it really fast. We shot it in 30 days.
Wow, that's amazing.
And, it was a full energy, and the energy comes from Jude's performance and also in the way that I decided to shoot the movie like that.
Yeah. You write a lot of your own films, and I mean, I guess it would seem obvious, but does the process of you being the guy behind the pen as well as the guy behind the camera, does that kind of make things a little more smooth than it would have been? Because, I mean, you hear so many stories.
Well, the writer's never temperamental.
Right. You never have to worry about the angry writer, because you are the angry writer.
Exactly. I write these movies, and they're smaller, odder movies on purpose. I'm not trying to write Transformers 4.
Sure.
I'm not making a movie for everyone. I'm making a movie hopefully for certain people who will love it, and I write character-driven scripts, so I have been very lucky to work with some really good actors. And in the rehearsal process and in the process, we sort of work out the kinks of the script so that by the time we're on the set, the script is sort of locked, so that we now can focus on performance and visual style of the movie. And so every once in a while, something isn't working, even though you thought it was working, and I have to put my writer hat on, and I'll come to the set with a few new lines. But in general, especially in Dom, this was a movie where we stuck very closely to the script. And because we had rehearsed it, there was a theatricality that almost required us then to stick very closely with the script. But I love it. I mean, on television, I direct stuff I don't write.
Yeah.
So I get to wear that hat as a director for hire, basically, and hopefully contribute an enormous amount. But ultimately, I'm working at the service of the writer on television. And then with my movies, I get to, I live or fall with my own decision making. And so I enjoy that very much.
So is that more frustrating or more liberating to direct someone else's words, to where you don't have the responsibility of being the one
I mean,
that wrote?
I've been very lucky, knock on wood product, to have been, to have worked with great writers on television, whether it's Lena Dunham on Girls or the people that I work with on Ugly Betty, or all of these places that I did the pilot of Ugly Betty. I direct on Girls and other stuff like that. And I've worked with really good writers who are very collaborative in that sense. So I always feel like my voice is heard.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, part of what's fun about it is I'm trying to take their voice and make it as good as possible, So I kind of get a kick out of it. Like I get excited when they're excited and they think that we've improved upon what's on the page, both in the visual and in the casting and all of that other stuff. So there is a real joy in that. But at the end of the day, it's their baby and they have the final say. I've been lucky to have very collaborative people that I've worked with, but it's a different animal and you're paid accordingly. I made Dom Hemingway. It took 2 years basically of my life. I was paid scale. That I didn't get paid for that really, but that I got to make my movie, which is a gift.
Right.
On TV you do get paid pretty well, but you have to sort of sacrifice a little of sort of your final vision. So there's a little yin and yang of it, but I'm really lucky to work in both mediums. And in fact, TV allows me to go off and make these movies. It gives me that freedom to be able to say, okay, I don't have to do a movie that I don't want to do. I don't have to sort of make a romantic comedy that's going to be sort of crap so that I pay my rent. I end up being able to just focus on the stuff I want to do.
Do you get offered those like big Hollywood films? Like, do they say we want you to make a Transformers type of movie?
I have such a strange career, honestly. Like most people in Hollywood have no idea what to make of me. They don't know. They just are so confused by my career. They look at my TV stuff and they're like, well, he's done Criminal Minds pilot, which is like a thriller, and then he's done Girls, which is not a thriller, and then Dom. So they don't even know, and Hollywood loves to categorize you. After the Ugly Betty pilot, I got offered like every romantic comedy that was of a certain like medium level. I wasn't being offered The Devil Wears Prada. I was being offered some Kate Hudson project, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I understand the appeal of that on some level. It would be nice to make a movie that made some money and all of that. But I just feel like one thing I have going for me is that when I'm going after an actor, they can look at my filmography, and if they like what I do, they can see that I've been passionate about these projects that I've written and directed, and I've served the other actors really well in my movies. And it helps me get a cast. It helps attract a cast from the last movie I did. So a little bit, you live or die in your filmography. And I'd rather, if I'm going to die, have it my own material than sort of a mid-level romantic comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that you haven't just taken the money for like something, just for the sake of it. We did talk before we started this, but let's go ahead and plug you're directing Salem,
That's right.
which is coming up really soon. So
I did the first episode. Basically the pilot of Salem, which is a new show that's going to be on this network called the WGN. It's set during the witch trials, and the conceit is that there really were witches, and they're setting up their enemies to be accused of being witches. So it's actually very clever. It's dark. It's sexy. It's horror. It's a big spectacle. It was a really interesting year to go from Girls to Dom Hemingway to Salem. I was like, whoa, what is it? But it was fun.
Yeah.
We were joking. The same AD from Girls came to AD the pilot of Salem, and we were joking that on Girls, literally, it's like, whose close-up should we do next? And on Salem, we're like, here's 150 extras and fire and special effects and rain towers, and it was about the exact opposite in terms of physical production.
Yeah.
But I feel, it's nice to get those different sides of my personality out. And I think it ultimately helps my films that I write and direct, because I sort of have a lot of experiences from doing a lot of different things that I can pull in and sort of remember, oh, this is something I learned on this thing I can probably use here. And certainly think that the scenes between Dom and his daughter in this movie, who's played by Emilia Clarke, like, those scenes, I felt like a connection with Amelia's character that I think probably helped that I had done Girls for a while, like just being in the mindset of a young 20s people. So it was great.
Yeah, it's a really fun film. Dom Hemingway is the movie. Richard Shepard is the director. This really has been a thrill for me because I've really admired your work.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to Dallas and showing us this.
I'm happy to. I'm excited. I
Please come back with your next one.
I
too.
will,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right,
Absolutely.
thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
It was nice fun.